latest weather, traffic, and news updates online at 560theanswer.com. Now, from the Signature Bank Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. John Daniel Davidson, writing in The Federalist, neocon Iraq war rhetoric is back, lazily repurposed for Iran. He writes, it's a slam dunk case. We have to fight them over here so we don't fight them. We have to fight them over there so we don't have to fight them over here. We'll be greeted as liberators. Islam is a religion of peace. Either you're with us or you're with the terrorists. God has planted in every heart the desire to live in freedom. Those last two are direct quotes from W. Over the past few days, writes Davidson, almost since the moment Israel began bombing Iran, we've seen the reappearance of almost all of the old Gulf War rhetoric. Then as now, the purpose is to justify U.S. military adventure abroad and gaslight the American people into supporting regime change in Iran. Well, yeah, I think that's a little bit lazy, ironically. You know, so for all the neocons' lazy rhetoric is back. Well, I think that's a bit of a lazy response to the alleged lazy rhetoric, which is to say, nobody's running around saying we're going to be greeted as liberators, because nobody, with perhaps the exception of Lindsey Graham, is suggesting that troops be deployed to Tehran. That's number one, and that's like a big difference. Number two, the president is not talking about regime change. In fact, here's what he actually said yesterday.
Some of the people in the base don't want a long-term war. They're afraid that we're going to get into a long-term war.
We're not looking for a long-term war.
Yeah.
We're looking. I only want one thing. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon.
Right.
That's it. I'm not looking long-term, short-term. And I've been saying that for 20 years. I've been saying it as a civilian who got a lot of publicity. People would cover it. Very simply, Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. That's it. It's not a question of anything else. And if you did, you wouldn't have much of a country, because they would use it on us and they'd use it on other people, and they'd be a terror all over the world.
So it's a very limited in scope based on what the president is saying, and as he points out, has been saying for some time. To the extent that, like, wanting regime change as Iran is a bad thing, well, of course it's not a bad thing. It's just how you design to go about doing it. I want peaceful pluralists in Iran to take over and elevate peaceful pluralists to the leadership of their country. That's not the same thing as saying I want to deploy American troops to try to affect that and, you know, build a Midwestern democracy in Iran overnight. We have learned those lessons. So you can learn some lessons, but not be so naive as to believe that Iran is a country to sort of turn a blind eye to, which seems to be the position of those within the MAGA House who are arguing against supporting this bombing campaign that Israel has started against Iranian nuclear sites for the purposes of limiting their nuclear program. So sort of falling back on an argument about intelligence they don't know. And I'm not saying I have a better handle on it necessarily, but they should say with more definitiveness that Iran is nowhere close to a nuclear weapon. They've been saying that for 30 years. Talk about lazy talking points. A lot has transpired in those 30 years that it's been reported. As we talked about earlier this week, there have been any number of interventions, strategic interventions to slow the pace of the Iranian nuclear program. The Stuxnet virus comes to mind, and it's an easy one people remember. And I'm sure many more efforts by Mossad and by our intelligence community to do the same that we don't know about. But when we talk about lazy arguments, the people that are just sort of throwing up their hands and saying any sort of intervention to stop an enemy of the West in general and America in particular is somehow getting into a forever war, is engaging in nation building, that's what's lazy to me.
And it's just truly unimaginable how leftists are now supporting this regime. They had a protest in New York yesterday. I mean, it's a regime that hangs women for not properly veiling and gay people for being gay.
If they support Hamas, why wouldn't they support Hamas' sponsor? Of course they're going to. That's what the left does. Yinam Cohen is the Consul General of Israel to the Midwest. He joins us now. Consul General Cohen, thanks for being with us again. Appreciate it.
Good morning.
The perspective and what you've heard from Trump, and basically it seems to me that he sort of put the Ayatollah on the clock, that in the next few days there has to be some movement, or he is going to fold in and provide support to Israel to finish the job with respect to the key sites in Iran's nuclear program. Is that your belief?
I've been following President Trump's remarks over the past 48 hours, and I'm looking forward to see what his decision is. And I'm sure that whatever he decides, that he'll take the choice that is better for America, that is best for America.
Well, what choice is that?
I want to say at the same time that Israel has started its operation in Iran 7 days ago, and we are operating on our own right now, and we do not have any expectation from any other country to fight for us. We're doing the right thing for us. We're doing the right thing, we believe, for the Middle East, for the whole world. But we believe that it's our job to do that. Now, if the United States chooses to join forces, that, of course, we will welcome that. But this is not what we're asking right now. But I want to say something broader about that, because I totally heard some of the remarks that you quoted about some of the arguments of people regarding our operation. And I want to say that we're not waging war now. We're conducting an operation that aims to prevent a much more destructive war down the line, maybe even within a few months. But imagine that if we wait, it might be against a nuclear-armed Iran, which will make it much more dangerous, much more destructive, and much longer. And this is why we're acting now.
Well, let's get into some of that and provide perhaps you can provide some additional depth to the responses to some of the critics, and as well as those expressing legitimate concerns that are just concerned and are concerned in a good faith way. So the precipice of an Iran with nuclear weapons. The intel that Israel has, that Bibi has shared, generally speaking, prior to launching this campaign, as you described it, was what?
We know that Iran has worked for more than 20 years now on enriching its uranium. What we've seen over the past few weeks is that while negotiating with the United States, they did not do that in good faith. They were rushing into weaponizing their enriched uranium. In other words, to convert it into actual nuclear bomb. At the same time, they were also accelerating their efforts to build up their ballistic missile arsenal. The ballistic missiles that have been launched towards Israel over the past 7 days and have caused very, very significant damage. Now, imagine that not just 40 or 45 Iranian missiles hit Israel, but 200 or 500 missiles. Or imagine that even only one missile hit Israel, but with a nuclear warhead. That could be really devastating, and this is why we're acting now. And by the way, let me say just one more word about their efforts with regard to the ballistic missiles, because amongst other things, we have seen that they have started to develop intercontinental missiles. In other words, missiles that are capable of hitting not only Israel, the Middle East, and Europe, but also the United States.
Oh. And so to the people that say, Consul General, I can appreciate that, but this is something we've been reading in the New York Times since the late '90s. So why should we believe that that's actually the case? We've been on the precipice for 2 decades. Why are we really now on the precipice this time as opposed to previous times?
First, because they have accelerated their efforts to enrich uranium, and right now we believe they have enough enriched uranium in the highest level, that is enough for 9 nuclear bombs. And at the same time, for the first time, we have identified activity to weaponize this enriched uranium and convert it into a nuclear bomb. Now, we have to understand why the Iranians are doing that now. Over the past 20 years, they have worked into parallel routes, I would say. The first one is their nuclear path, and the other one was the regional malign activity. They have built what they called the Ring of Fire, a network of terrorist proxy organizations that was supposed to encircle Israel, Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in the Islamic Jihad in the West Bank and Gaza, the Shiite militias in Syria and Iraq, the Houthis in Yemen. And they were supposed to be the tool for Iran to challenge Israel, to challenge Israel's security, and to attack Israel. This was what Hamas did on October 7th, and this is why they expected Hezbollah and others to do. Now, since Hezbollah was very severely hit by Israel, and since the Assad regime in Syria collapsed, Iran lost some of its major assets in the region, in the Middle East. And they're feeling that having nuclear weapons would be, a significant tool to deter Israel and to deter the United States. But this is a very, very dangerous game.
Something else that Prime Minister Netanyahu said, and has become an issue of debate. He said in a conversation with Brett Baer that Iran was behind the two failed assassination attempts against President Trump last year. That's what he seemed to indicate. And Baer asked for clarification, and he basically said, Bibi said, yeah, we have through proxies, Iran was involved, and through their intel, yes, they want to kill him. What he knows. That's so we know, and we discussed earlier in the program about the one plot that was connected to Iran where an arrest was made of an Afghan national in November of last year. But what Prime Minister Netanyahu had to say about their involvement in Butler, Pennsylvania, and the West Palm attempts on the president's life, what more can you tell us about sort of the evidentiary basis to make that claim?
I don't have any further information about that, but for me, it's very clear. Let's look at it on a broader perspective. Israel for them is a small Satan. The United States is a big Satan. We just stand in their way to America because America is a big Satan for them. So it is clear that the ultimate goal of the mullah radical regime in Iran is the United States, because you are the symbol of freedom and democracy. You embody all the values of Western liberal democracies that they hate so much. And this is why it's not only about Israel, it's about Europe and about our shared values.
Trump said yesterday that the mullahs want to meet and they want to come to the White House, and he may acquiesce to that. Do you think that would be a good idea?
Well, they said that they're not coming to the White House. Yeah. They're not ready to negotiate with the United States. I prefer, of course, we all prefer diplomacy to any other means, to military operations, but diplomacy have worked with the Iranians for more than 20 years. Just recently, President Trump himself very personally dedicated a lot of efforts to find a way to a diplomatic solution with Iran that would prevent us all from, doing what we're doing right now. But I haven't seen any success. The Iranians never negotiated in good faith. As I said, while negotiating with President Trump, they were rushing their nuclear ambitions and their build-up of their missile ballistic arsenal. So this is something that we have to bear in mind.
Yeah, Iranian social media. No Iranian official has ever asked to grovel at the gates of the White House.
That's just
the only thing more despicable than his lies is his cowardly threat.
Yeah, that's just their bull jive. I mean, of course that's their, just like we're never going to surrender and we're never going to do this and we're, the great Satan, all that stuff. I don't need the hyperventilation is uninteresting to me. What's interesting is whether or not there's any point in terms of diplomatic conversation. And Bibi has clearly indicated there isn't. And we've seen that too, to a large extent with Putin. And so the question is it even, is it almost Pollyannish to entertain any more conversation, because it's clear all they're doing is trying to stall, to regroup or come up with another angle of attack?
Oh, absolutely. That's been the strategy for 20 years. And I think that now is the time to make sure that when we're you know what? We're not in the 10th hour. We're in the 11th hour, or some say in the 12th hour. This is the very last moment that we can stop Iran, prevent Iran from having nuclear bombs. We want to see a peaceful Iran. We want to see a peaceful Middle East. But the one country that has destabilized the Middle East over the past 20 years is Iran. Now imagine this power coupled with nuclear arms. That would be devastating, not just for Israel, not just for the Middle East, globally. And this is what we're doing right now.
And the last part of the tweet that was just put on social media, it said Trump's cowardly threat to take out Iran's supreme leader. Do you think if the Ayatollah was eliminated and the regime changed, that would be a positive thing? And who would take his place?
Our goal in this operation is to prevent Iran from having nuclear bombs and from a much more massive arsenal of ballistic missiles. We're not looking at the regime change, but if there is a regime change in Iran, of course, it will be a very positive step because this regime that has taken, control over the Iranians in 1979 has brought only devastation, destruction, terror, and wars, not only to the Iranians, but to the whole Middle East. So I think that any change in this regime will be a very positive step.
With respect to Khamenei, there was a report that Israeli source confirms the report from Iran International that has obtained information from a Western intelligence source, according to which Khamenei has been removed from making key decisions to his poor mental state, and military commanders are hiding the reality of the war from him in order to manage his mental state. Do we have a incapacitated Ayatollah in Tehran?
It's not just about one person. It's about the whole construction, the whole hierarchy that surrounds him. And while I would say major leadership of this hierarchy was eliminated in the past few days, there are still some very radical people who are taking the decision, whether with the involvement of Khamenei or not.
But do you know if he's still the shot caller or if he is in cognitive decline, a phrase we've come to know and love?
I don't have any information that I can share at this point.
Okay, or that I can share. Okay. Yinam Cohen is the Consul General of Israel to the Midwest. Consul General Cohen, thanks so much for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And yep, thanks. Have a good day. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's what Chicago is talking about. It's Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy on AM 560. The Answer.
Do you owe $10,000 or more in credit card debt or personal loans? With credit card debt at all-time highs, Debt Relief Advocates is urgently notifying consumers of debt relief now being